30 years of solitude shattered the moment Boone Slater opened his cabin door. He stood on the porch, rifle in hand, studying the woman who shouldn't exist. She leaned against his gatepost, one hand pressed to her bleeding shoulder, the other gripping the wooden rail for support. The late afternoon sun caught the auburn highlights in her dark hair, and despite her obvious pain, she held his gaze without flinching. "I know you don't allow visitors," she said, her voice carrying across the 20 yards between them. "But I'm asking anyway." Boone's finger tightened on the trigger. Every instinct screamed at him to order her away, to maintain the barriers that had kept him safe for 3 decades. Yet something in her tone made him hesitate. She wasn't begging, she wasn't demanding. She was simply stating a fact and waiting for his response. "How did you get past the markers?" he called back. She tilted her head, studying him with eyes the color of storm clouds. "Same way anyone would. I walked. Nobody walks past those markers." "I did." The simplicity of her answer unsettled him more than any elaborate explanation could have. Boone stepped down from the porch, keeping the rifle ready but not aimed directly at her. As he drew closer, he could see the wound more clearly. The bullet had torn through her shoulder, missing anything vital, but she was losing blood steadily. "Who shot you?" he asked. "Men who wanted something I wouldn't give them." She swayed slightly, catching herself against the post. "They'll be following my trail, but not tonight. I made sure of that." Boone stopped 10 feet away from her, close enough to see the exhaustion etched into her features, but far enough to react if she posed a threat. The logical choice was clear: send her away and reinforce his defenses. But as he watched her struggle to stay upright, memory stirred in the depths of his mind. Another woman, another desperate moment, another choice that had changed everything. "What's your name?" he found himself asking. "Iris Quaid." She lifted her chin despite her obvious weakness. "And before you ask, no, I won't tell you why I'm really here. Not yet." The honesty in her admission caught him off guard. Most people in her situation would have spun elaborate tales to gain his sympathy. Instead, she'd admitted to keeping secrets while asking for his help. Boone lowered his rifle completely. "The nearest doctor is 3 days' ride." "I know." Iris pushed herself away from the post, taking a tentative step toward the gate. "I also know you have medical supplies in that cabin. I can see the light reflecting off the glass bottles in your window." He followed her gaze to his cabin window, where his collection of medicines sat on the sill. No traveler passing by would have been able to identify those bottles from this distance. Not unless they knew exactly what to look for. Unless they'd been here before. "How do you know about my supplies?" Boone asked. But Iris had already started walking toward his gate, and as she moved, he noticed something that made his blood run cold. She was walking directly along the path that led between the unmarked graves, stepping with the confidence of someone who knew exactly where each body lay buried, bodies that no living person should know about. Boone's hands shook as he cleaned the bullet wound on Iris's shoulder. She sat on his kitchen table, her torn dress pulled down to expose the injury. The kerosene lamp cast dancing shadows across her pale skin, and despite the pain she had to be feeling, she remained perfectly still while he worked. "You have steady hands," she said, watching him thread the needle. "Almost like you've done this before." "I've patched up plenty of animals over the years." Boone avoided her eyes, focusing on the task. "People aren't much different." "No, they're not." Her voice carried a strange sadness, though animals are usually more honest about their intentions. He began stitching the wound, and she didn't even flinch. Most people would have been crying or cursing by now, but Iris simply watched his face as if she were studying a map of familiar territory. "Why aren't you asking me the obvious questions?" she said. "Which would be, why I was shot, who's chasing me, what I want from you." She paused. "Why I know things about this place that I shouldn't know." Boone's hand stilled for a moment before continuing with the stitches. "Maybe because I'm not sure I want the answers." "Smart man." Iris shifted slightly, testing his reaction. "Some truths are more dangerous than bullets." "Are you dangerous, Iris?" She considered the question seriously. "Not to you. Not unless you try to stop me from doing what I came here to do." "And what's that?" "Settle an old debt." Boone finished the last stitch and reached for the bandage. As he wrapped her shoulder, his fingers brushed against a scar on her upper arm. It was old, faded, but he recognized the shape immediately. A burn mark in the pattern of a branding iron. The same mark he'd seen once before, burned into the arm of the woman who'd died because of his choices 30 years ago. "Where did you get this scar?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Iris looked down at the mark his finger had traced. From someone who thought he owned me. When? Long time ago. I was just a girl then. She met his eyes. About the same age as your Sarah when she died. The room went dead silent. Boone's hands fell away from her arm as if he'd been burned. No one knew about Sarah. No one alive knew that name or how she'd died. He'd made sure of that when he'd buried the 3 men responsible in unmarked graves around his property. How do you know that name? He whispered. Iris slipped down from the table, adjusting her dress to cover the bandage. Because she was my sister. The words hit Boone like a physical blow. He staggered backward, his mind reeling. Sarah had never mentioned a sister. In the months they'd been together, she'd told him she had no family, no one who would miss her if she disappeared. That's impossible. Sarah said what you needed to hear. Iris moved closer to him, and now he could see the resemblance. The same storm-gray eyes, the same stubborn set to her jaw. She was protecting me, just like she protected everyone she cared about. Boone sank into a chair, the weight of 30 years of guilt pressing down on him. She's dead because of me. No. Iris knelt beside his chair, forcing him to look at her. She's dead because of them. The men who hunted her down like an animal. The men who... She trailed off, then straightened. The men whose graves I've been standing on since I arrived. You knew they were buried here. I helped you dig them. Boone's world tilted on its axis. What? You don't remember me because I was hiding in the woods that night. I was only 14, terrified, watching you carry my sister's body home. Iris's voice grew quiet. I watched you hunt down the men who killed her. I watched you bury them. And when you collapsed from grief and exhaustion, I helped you finish covering the graves. The memory came rushing back. The small figure in the shadows. The sound of a shovel working long after he'd lost the strength to continue. He'd assumed it was a dream, a hallucination brought on by grief and rage. Why didn't you? Because you were destroying yourself with guilt. And I was just a child who needed you to survive. Iris stood, moving toward the window. I've spent 24 years learning to be strong enough to come back. Come back for what? She turned to face him, and in the lamplight her smile was both beautiful and terrifying. To finish what they started. The words hung in the air like smoke from a dying fire. Boone stared at Iris, his mind struggling to process what she'd just said. Finish what they started? Sarah's killers are dead. I made sure of that. You killed the men who pulled the triggers. Iris moved to his mantel, studying the single photograph that sat there, a faded image of Sarah laughing beside a creek. But you never found the man who sent them. There was no one else. Those 3 were drifters, thieves. They were hired guns. Iris picked up the photograph, tracing Sarah's face with her fingertip. The man who ordered my sister's death is still alive, Boone, still breathing while she rots in the ground. Boone's chest tightened. Who? Marcus Whitley. He owns half the cattle ranches between here and the territorial capital. Iris set the photograph down carefully. Sarah discovered he was rustling cattle from smaller ranchers, selling them under false bills of sale. She was going to expose him. Sarah never mentioned, because she was protecting you. Iris turned to face him. She knew if you got involved, you'd either end up dead or wanted by the law, so she planned to handle it herself. The room seemed to shrink around Boone. All these years he'd believed Sarah died because of random violence, bad luck, being in the wrong place at the wrong time. The guilt had been crushing, but at least it had made sense. How do you know all this? Because I've spent 24 years preparing. Iris pulled a folded paper from her dress pocket, learning his habits, his business, his weaknesses, building a case that will destroy him. Boone unfolded the paper. It was covered with meticulous handwriting, dates, locations, names of witnesses, evidence of cattle theft spanning decades. This is comprehensive. He looked up at her. But if you have all this evidence, why not just take it to the territorial marshal? Because Marcus Whitley owns the territorial marshal. Iris's voice hardened. He owns judges, sheriffs, half the politicians in the territory. The law won't touch him. Then what are you planning? Justice. The only kind men like him understand. Boone felt ice forming in his stomach. You're talking about murder. I'm talking about balance. Iris moved closer to him. He took my sister's life. I'm going to take everything that matters to him, his reputation, his fortune, his freedom. And if he tries to stop me, she shrugged. Well, that's his choice. Iris, listen to me. No, you listen. Her voice cut through his protest like a blade. I didn't come here for your permission or your help. I came here because Sarah loved you, and I thought you deserved to know the truth before I destroyed the man who killed her." Boone stood slowly, his hands shaking. "And what about the men who shot you? The ones following your trail?" "Whitley's men. I got too close to something important, so he sent them to eliminate me." Iris smiled grimly. "But I eliminated them first." "You killed them?" "2 of them. The 3rd one will carry word back to Whitley that I'm not as easy to kill as he thought." She moved toward the door. "Which means he'll be coming himself now, along with everyone he can hire." "When?" "Tomorrow, maybe the day after." Iris paused with her hand on the door handle. "That's why I need you to leave, Boone. Pack what you can carry and ride out before dawn. This is my home. Sarah was my sister." Iris opened the door, letting the night air rush in. "She died for trying to do what's right. I won't let her sacrifice be meaningless." Boone grabbed her arm as she stepped onto the porch. "There has to be another way. There might have been once." Iris looked down at his hand on her arm, then back to his face. "But that was before I found out what Whitley did to her before he had her killed." The blood drained from Boone's face. "What do you mean?" "I mean the bullet wounds weren't the only injuries on her body when you found her." Iris's voice dropped to a whisper. "I mean she suffered for hours before they finally let her die." Boone's grip tightened involuntarily. "How do you know that?" "Because the man who told me is still alive. He was there that day, forced to watch." Iris pulled free of his grasp. "And tomorrow night he's going to tell Marcus Whitley exactly how it felt." She stepped off the porch, disappearing into the darkness beyond the lamp's reach. But her voice drifted back to him, cold as winter wind. "The question is, Boone, will you be there to watch him pay?" Boone didn't sleep that night. He sat on his porch, rifle across his knees, watching the darkness beyond his property line. Every shadow seemed to move. Every sound in the distance made his finger tighten on the trigger. But it wasn't fear of Whitley's men that kept him awake. It was the image of Sarah suffering that Iris had burned into his mind. For 30 years, he'd tortured himself with guilt over her death. Now he discovered his guilt had been merciful compared to the truth. As dawn broke over the hills, Iris emerged from the barn where she'd spent the night. She moved differently now, with purpose and deadly grace. The wounded woman who'd stumbled to his gate was gone, replaced by something harder and more dangerous. "You're still here," she said, climbing the porch steps. "It's my land. Land won't mean much when you're buried under it." Iris sat beside him on the wooden steps. "Whitley has over a dozen men on his payroll, all of them killers. Then why are you so confident you can beat him?" "Because he thinks I'm just a grieving sister looking for revenge." Iris pulled a small leather pouch from her pocket. "He doesn't know I've been planning this for longer than he's been planning to kill me." She opened the pouch, revealing what looked like ordinary metal buttons. But as Boone examined them closer, he realized they were actually small explosive charges, no bigger than coins. "Where did you?" "A mining camp north of here." "Turns out dynamite isn't the only thing that explodes." Iris closed the pouch. "These are small enough to hide anywhere, powerful enough to bring down a building." "What building?" "Whitley's ranch house. Tonight, while he's hosting his monthly gathering of corrupt officials and cattle buyers." Iris's smile was cold as winter steel. "Every man who helped him cover up Sarah's murder will be in that room." Boone felt his stomach drop. "How many innocent people will be in there too? Women and children were sent away yesterday. I made sure of that." Iris stood, brushing dust from her dress. "Only the guilty ones will pay." "And the witness? The man who saw what they did to Sarah?" "Thomas Hardy, Whitley's former ranch foreman." Iris began walking toward the corral where Boone's horses were kept. "He's been carrying that secret for 30 years, letting it eat him alive. Tonight he gets his chance to unburden himself." "You're going to force him to confess?" "I'm going to give him the opportunity to choose redemption over complicity." Iris stopped at the corral fence, studying the horses. "What he does with that opportunity is up to him." Boone followed her, his mind racing. "This is madness, Iris. Even if you succeed, you'll be hunted for the rest of your life. Maybe. Or maybe I'll be free for the first time since I was 14. She turned to face him. "Either way, Sarah will finally have justice. And what about you? What about the life you could have?" "I've never had a life, Boone. I've only had a purpose." Iris reached through the fence rails to stroke the nose of his bay mare. "But I did have something else once. Something I lost the night my sister died." "What?" "Hope." She looked at him with those storm-gray eyes. "Hope that there were still good people in the world. People worth saving, worth protecting." Boone stepped closer to the fence. You could have that again. Could I? Iris's voice was barely audible. After what I'm about to do? After the blood I'm about to spill? Sarah wouldn't want this for you. Sarah is dead. The words came out sharp and bitter. And the men who killed her have been living free for 30 years while she moldered in the ground. Boone reached through the fence, covering her hand with his. Then let me help you. Iris went very still. What? You said Sarah loved me. If that's true, then her justice is my responsibility too. Boone squeezed her hand gently. Let me help you get Thomas Hardy to testify. Let me help you bring Whitley to real justice, not just revenge. For a moment, something flickered in Iris's eyes. Hope, maybe, or the memory of it. But then the sound of hoofbeats echoed across the valley, and that flickering light died. Too late, she whispered, pulling her hand free. They're here. Boone turned to see a dust cloud rising in the distance, moving fast toward his property. 8 riders, maybe 10, pushing their horses hard. How much time do we have? He asked. 10 minutes if we're lucky. Iris was already running toward the cabin. Boone, there's something else I need to tell you about Sarah. Something about the night she died that changes everything. What? She paused at the cabin door, her face pale. She was pregnant. The words hit Boone like a physical blow. The world seemed to tilt, and he grabbed the fence post to steady himself. The child lived. Iris's voice broke. Marcus Whitley has been raising Sarah's daughter as his own for 30 years. The thunder of approaching hoofbeats grew louder, but Boone could barely hear it over the roaring in his ears. Sarah had been carrying his child when she died, and that child was still alive. If this story is touching you in any way, don't forget to hit the like button, share it with someone who loves a good Western tale, and subscribe to the Western Redemption channel. Every single day at exactly 10 a.m., a brand new story drops, packed with emotion, justice, and redemption. So turn on the notification bell and don't miss the next chapter, because out here in the West, no one waits around. The first bullet splintered the cabin door as Boone and Iris dove inside. How many? Boone asked, crawling toward the window with his rifle. 8 that I can see. Iris crouched beside the back wall, checking the ammunition in her pistol. But Whitley's not with them. This is just his cleanup crew. Boone peered through the window. The riders had spread out in a semicircle around his cabin, using his own corral and outbuildings for cover. Professional killers, moving with military precision. They're not here to capture us, he said. No, Whitley wants us dead before we can reach his daughter. Iris's voice carried a weight of grim satisfaction, which means we're closer to the truth than he's comfortable with. Another volley of bullets shattered the remaining glass in Boone's windows. He returned fire, watching one of the attackers stumble backward behind the water trough. Tell me about her, he said, reloading quickly. Tell me about my daughter. Her name is Emma. She thinks she's Emma Whitley. Iris fired through the broken window, forcing 2 men to retreat from the corral fence. She's beautiful, Boone. She has Sarah's eyes and your stubborn jaw. Does she know that she's adopted? No. Whitley told her that her parents died in an Indian raid when she was a baby. Iris ducked as return fire peppered the wall above her head. She grew up believing he saved her out of kindness. Where is she now? The Whitley Ranch, getting ready for tonight's gathering. She serves as his hostess for these events. Iris's expression darkened. She has no idea she's serving dinner to the men who murdered her real mother. Boone felt rage building in his chest. Hot and dangerous. We have to get her out of there. That's the plan. But first we have to survive the next 10 minutes. Iris pointed toward the back of the cabin. There's a root cellar behind the kitchen. It has a tunnel that leads to the creek. How do you know about? Because Sarah showed it to me the last time I visited her here. Iris fired again, then looked at him with urgent eyes. She dug that tunnel herself, Boone. She was planning to use it if trouble ever came. Then why didn't she? Because they caught her away from the cabin. She was at the creek, getting water. Iris's voice broke slightly. If she'd been here, if she'd had access to the tunnel. Boone touched her shoulder. You can't change the past. No, but I can change the future. Iris moved toward the kitchen. Emma is going to learn the truth tonight, whether her father wants her to or not. A new sound reached them over the gunfire, the thunder of more approaching horses. Boone risked a look out the front window and felt his stomach drop. Marcus Whitley himself was riding hard toward the cabin, followed by another dozen men. He's here, Boone said. Iris peered out beside him. Marcus Whitley was exactly what Boone had expected. a tall, silver-haired man with the bearing of someone accustomed to absolute authority. Even from this distance, Boone could see the family resemblance between Whitley and the woman riding beside him, Emma. She was beautiful, just as Iris had said, dark hair like Sarah's, but with Boone's strong features. She sat her horse with natural grace, completely unaware that she was riding toward the cabin where her real father was fighting for his life. "Why did he bring her?" Boone whispered. "Insurance." Iris's voice was deadly calm. "He knows I won't risk hurting her." Whitley raised his hand, and the gunfire stopped. His voice carried clearly across the distance. "Iris Quaid, I know you're in there. Come out and we can settle this like civilized people." "Civilized?" Iris muttered. "That's rich coming from him," Whitley continued. "I've brought someone who wants to meet you, someone who has questions about her family history." Emma dismounted and walked a few steps toward the cabin. When she spoke, her voice was exactly like Sarah's, clear, strong, unafraid. "Miss Quaid, my father says you knew my parents. Is that true?" Boone felt his heart breaking. His daughter was standing 50 yards away asking about parents she'd never known, while the man who'd killed her mother sat watching from horseback. "What do I tell her?" he whispered to Iris. "The truth." Iris stood slowly, her hands visible but still holding her pistol. "Emma, your father is right. I did know your parents. Tell me about them." Iris looked at Boone, then back toward the young woman. "Your mother was the bravest person I ever knew. She died trying to protect innocent people from men who thought they were above the law. And my father." "Your father?" Iris's voice caught. "Your father is still alive." Emma took another step forward. "What do you mean?" "Father said they both died in the raid." Marcus Whitley's face had gone pale. "Emma, get back to your horse. Now." But Emma ignored him, her attention fixed on the cabin. "Miss Quaid, what are you saying?" Iris looked at Boone one final time. He nodded. "I'm saying, Emma, that the man who raised you isn't your father." Iris's voice carried across the valley like a bell. "And the man who killed your mother is sitting on that horse behind you." The silence that followed was deafening. Then Marcus Whitley drew his pistol and aimed it directly at his own daughter. Time stopped as Emma stared at the pistol pointed at her chest. "Father?" Her voice was small, confused, like a child waking from a nightmare. "What are you doing? You were never supposed to learn the truth." Marcus Whitley's hand was steady, his face carved from stone. "I gave you a good life. Emma, I raised you as my own daughter. That should have been enough. You're scaring me." "Good. You should be scared." Whitley's voice hardened. "Because the woman in that cabin is going to destroy everything we've built together. Everything you believe about yourself, about your family, about me." Emma backed away from him, her eyes wide with dawning horror. "The things she said, are they true? Does it matter? You've lived 30 years believing one story. Why change it now?" "Because it's my life." Emma's voice cracked with emotion. "These are my parents we're talking about." Boone couldn't stand it anymore. He stepped onto the porch, rifle in hand but not aimed at anyone. Every gun in the valley swung toward him, but he only had eyes for his daughter. "Emma," he said quietly. She turned at the sound of his voice, and the moment their eyes met, Boone saw recognition flash across her features. Not memory, she'd been too young for that, but something deeper. The recognition of blood calling to blood. "You're him, aren't you?" she whispered. "You're my real father." "Yes." Marcus Whitley's pistol swung toward Boone. "Stay back, Slater. She's my daughter now. She was never yours." Boone stepped down from the porch, moving slowly but deliberately toward Emma. "You stole her from her dead mother's arms." "I saved her." Whitley's composure cracked. "I gave her a life of privilege, education, respectability. What would you have given her? A cabin in the wilderness? A life of poverty and isolation?" "I would have given her the truth." Emma looked between the two men, her world crumbling around her. "What truth? What really happened to my mother?" Iris appeared in the cabin doorway. "Your mother discovered that Marcus was stealing cattle from smaller ranchers. She was going to expose him, ruin his empire. So he had her killed." "That's not—" Emma shook her head violently. "Father, tell them they're lying." Marcus Whitley was silent for a long moment. Then he said, "Your mother was a troublemaker, Emma. She threatened everything I'd worked to build. So you had her murdered?" "I had a problem eliminated." The words hit Emma like physical blows. She staggered, her face going white. "A problem? She was a person. She was my mother. She was a whore who spread her legs for a broken-down rancher. Whitley's mask finally slipped completely. Just like you're nothing but a bastard I kept alive out of pity. The valley erupted in gunfire as Boone's rage exploded. He charged toward Whitley, but the older man's hired guns opened fire from all directions. Boone dove for cover behind a water trough as bullets whined over his head. Through the chaos, he heard Emma screaming, but he couldn't see her. Iris was firing from the cabin doorway, trying to provide cover, but they were hopelessly outnumbered. Then, suddenly, the shooting stopped. Boone raised his head and saw Thomas Hardy standing beside his horse, a rifle in his hands pointed at Marcus Whitley's back. "That's enough, Marcus," Hardy said, his voice shaking with 30 years of suppressed guilt. "I've carried this secret long enough." Whitley spun in his saddle. "Thomas? What are you doing here?" "What I should have done 30 years ago." Hardy's finger tightened on the trigger. "Standing up to you. You work for me. I worked for the devil, and I'm done." Hardy looked at Emma, who was huddled behind her horse in terror. "That girl deserves to know what really happened to her mother." "Thomas, think about what you're doing." "I am thinking. For the first time in 3 decades, I'm thinking clearly." Hardy's voice grew stronger. "Sarah Quaid died begging for her unborn child's life. You made me watch while you cut that baby from her body. You made me help you clean up the blood." Emma's scream of horror echoed across the valley. "Then you raised that child as your own," Hardy continued, "letting her call you father while you slept easy every night knowing what you'd done to her real parents." Marcus Whitley raised his pistol toward Hardy, but the foreman was faster. The rifle shot echoed across the hills and Whitley toppled from his horse. But as he fell, his pistol discharged. The bullet caught Thomas Hardy in the chest, spinning him around. He collapsed beside his horse, blood spreading across his shirt. Emma ran to Hardy's side, dropping to her knees beside him. "Why?" she sobbed. "Why didn't you tell me before?" Hardy looked up at her with fading eyes. "Because I was a coward. But you," he reached up with a trembling hand to touch her face. "You have your mother's courage. Use it." "I don't know how." "Trust him." Hardy's gaze moved to Boone, who was approaching slowly. "Trust your real father." Thomas Hardy closed his eyes and was still. Emma looked up at Boone through her tears, and in that moment, 30 years of lies and deception crumbled away. But Marcus Whitley wasn't dead yet. He was crawling toward his fallen pistol, leaving a trail of blood in the dirt, and his eyes were fixed on Emma with murderous intent. Boone moved without thinking, 30 years of isolation forgotten in an instant. He threw himself between Emma and Marcus Whitley, just as the wounded man's fingers closed around his pistol. The bullet meant for Emma tore through Boone's shoulder, spinning him around, but he stayed on his feet. "Run, Emma!" he shouted. But she didn't move. She knelt frozen beside Thomas Hardy's body, staring at the blood on her hands. Whitley struggled to cock his pistol for another shot. "She's mine," he gasped, his face twisted with rage and pain. "I raised her. I own her. You own nothing." Boone advanced on the wounded man, his own blood streaming down his arm. "You never did. I gave her everything. You gave her lies." Boone kicked the pistol from Whitley's hand. "You built her life on the grave of her mother." Marcus Whitley tried to crawl away, but his strength was failing. Blood loss and shock were taking their toll. "You don't understand what you're destroying. Emma has position, respect, a future, built on murder and theft, built on necessity." Whitley collapsed onto his back. His breathing labored. "The weak get devoured by the strong. That's the law of this territory. Then you should have stayed strong." Boone stood over him, his shadow falling across Whitley's face. "Instead, you got old. You got careless. You brought my daughter into this fight." "Your daughter?" Whitley laughed, blood frothing at his lips. "You think she'll choose you? A broken hermit living in the wilderness? She's had 30 years of luxury, education, refinement. One conversation with her real father won't erase that." Boone looked back at Emma, who was finally rising to her feet. Her dress was stained with Hardy's blood, her face streaked with tears, but her eyes were clear and focused. "Emma," he said quietly, "are you hurt?" She shook her head, studying his face as if memorizing it. "You came out of cover for me. You took a bullet meant for me. You're my daughter. I don't even know you." The words stung, but Boone nodded. "You're right. You don't. But I know you, Emma. I see your mother in your eyes, in the way you stand, in your courage." "What courage?" "I'm terrified. Terrified people run away. You stayed to hear the truth even when it destroyed everything you thought you knew about your life." Boone stepped closer to her. That's not terror. That's bravery. Emma glanced down at Marcus Whitley, who was growing weaker by the minute. He really killed my mother? Yes. And raised me to cover up his crime? Yes. Then he's not my father at all. Emma's voice grew stronger. He's just the man who stole me from my real family. Marcus Whitley made one last desperate attempt to reach his pistol, but Emma stepped on his wrist, pinning his hand to the ground. No, she said firmly. You've taken enough from us. Iris emerged from the cabin, her own shoulder bandaged but her eyes alert. The hired guns are gone. They rode off when they saw their boss was dying. Boone looked around the valley. She was right. The other men had disappeared, probably deciding that whatever Whitley was paying them wasn't worth dying for. What happens now? Emma asked. Now we bury the dead, Iris said. Thomas Hardy deserves a proper grave. And him? Emma nodded toward Whitley. Boone considered the question. Marcus Whitley was still breathing, but barely. He had minutes left, maybe less. We let him answer to whatever judgment comes next, Boone said finally. His choices are finished. Emma knelt beside the dying man. Do you have anything to say to me? Any final words to the daughter you stole? Marcus Whitley's eyes focused on her face with great effort. For a moment, something that might have been genuine emotion flickered there. I did love you, he whispered. In my way, I did love you. Your way was wrong, Emma said quietly. But I understand. She stayed beside him as his breathing grew shallower, holding his hand despite everything he'd done. When Marcus Whitley finally exhaled his last breath, Emma closed his eyes gently. Why did you do that? Iris asked. After what he put you through. Emma stood, brushing dust from her dress. Because someone had to show him mercy, and because I refused to let his choices turn me into something bitter. She looked at Boone with Sarah's storm-gray eyes. I think that's what my real mother would have wanted. Boone felt tears running down his cheeks, the first tears he'd shed in 30 years. Yes, he said. That's exactly what she would have wanted. For the first time since she was a baby, Emma stepped into her father's arms. 3 months later, Boone Slater was no longer a loner. He stood on his porch, watching Emma tend to the vegetable garden she'd planted behind the cabin. She worked with the same determined grace that Sarah had possessed, her hands gentle but sure, as she coaxed life from the earth. She's got your stubborn streak, Iris said, joining him on the porch with 2 cups of coffee. And Sarah's kindness. Boone accepted the cup gratefully. Sometimes I catch her humming the same song Sarah used to sing. Blood remembers what the mind forgets. They stood in comfortable silence, watching Emma work. The past 3 months had transformed all of them. Emma had legally reclaimed her birth name, Emma Slater, and spent her days learning about her real parents from the people who'd loved them. Iris had stayed to help with the transition, though she spoke often of traveling west to California. The territorial marshal came by yesterday while you were in town, Iris said. About Whitley's estate? It's all been settled. The stolen cattle have been returned to their rightful owners. Emma has decided to donate the remainder of Whitley's property to establish a school for orphaned children. Iris smiled. She said it's what her mother would have wanted. Boone felt pride swell in his chest. In 3 months, Emma had shown more genuine compassion than Marcus Whitley had displayed in a lifetime. There's something else, Iris continued. Thomas Hardy's confession was recorded by the marshal before he died. Every corrupt official Whitley had bought is being investigated. Some have already been arrested. Good. Boone watched Emma stand and wipe her hands on her apron. Sarah's death finally means something. It always meant something, Boone. It meant she died fighting for what was right. Iris turned to face him. But now it also means her daughter gets to live the life Sarah would have wanted for her. Emma approached the porch, her face flushed from work but glowing with satisfaction. The tomatoes are coming in beautifully. We'll have enough to preserve for winter. We? Boone raised an eyebrow. Unless you're planning to throw me off your land. Emma grinned, and for a moment, she looked exactly like Sarah at 19. I know I didn't ask permission before planting that garden. This is your home. Emma. For as long as you want it to be. She climbed the porch steps and settled into the chair beside him. I've been thinking about that. About home, I mean. And? I spent 30 years living in a beautiful house with a man who gave me everything except the truth. Emma looked out across the valley. Now I'm living in a simple cabin with a father who's giving me the most precious thing of all, the chance to know who I really am. And who are you? Iris asked gently. I'm Emma Slater, daughter of Sarah Quaid and Boone Slater. Her voice grew stronger with each word. I'm the daughter of people who believed in standing up for what's right, even when it cost them everything. Boone reached over and took her hand. Your mother would be so proud of you. I hope so. I want to be worthy of the sacrifice she made. You already are. Iris stood, gathering the empty coffee cups. Which is why I need to tell you both something. I'm leaving tomorrow. Emma's face fell. But why? I thought you were happy here. I am. For the first time in 24 years, I'm truly happy. Iris smiled at both of them. But that happiness comes from knowing Sarah's story finally has the ending it deserved. You two have found each other. Justice has been served, and the corrupt system that killed her is being dismantled. Where will you go? Boone asked. California, like I always planned. I'm going to start fresh, build a life based on something other than revenge. Iris looked at Emma. Your mother always said that living well is the best justice of all. Will we see you again? Count on it. I'm not losing touch with my only family. Iris hugged Emma tightly. Besides, someone needs to make sure your father doesn't go back to being a hermit. No chance of that, Boone said, looking at his daughter. I've got too much to live for now. As the sun set behind the hills, the three of them sat together on the porch, sharing stories and planning for the future. The stone markers that had once defined the boundaries of Boone's isolation now simply marked the edges of a family's home. Emma had already talked about inviting the neighboring ranchers for a harvest celebration, the first social gathering the property had seen in 30 years. Boone had agreed, surprising himself with how much he looked forward to it. Do you think she knows? Emma asked quietly as the first stars appeared. Do you think Mother knows how things turned out? Boone squeezed her hand. I think she's been watching over us all along, and I think she's finally at peace. We all are, Iris added. As if to prove her point, Emma began humming one of Sarah's old songs, the melody drifting across the valley like a blessing. Boone closed his eyes and listened. 30 years of grief finally transforming into something lighter. Fear had kept him alone for decades, but love, the love of a daughter he'd never known existed, had brought him home at last. The loner rancher was loner no more. If you enjoyed this story, click the video on your screen now to watch another unforgettable tale from the American frontier, where courage and family bonds forge destinies beyond imagination. Don't forget to subscribe and consider a super chat to help us keep bringing you more stories like these. Your support means everything to us.